Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Road Monkey podcast. My name is Kevin and I host a show that delves into people's journeys, explores their experiences and shares inspiring stories from the moments and life events that have brought them to where they are. In this episode we are joined by the wonderful Mark Watson. Mark shares with us his journey both personally and professionally, from being a passionate runner to a successful European managing director in a marketing and sourcing company. He discusses the importance of community, the lessons learned from his global experiences, and the impact of parenthood on his life perspective. We explore the significance of self-worth, the influence of role models, and the value of seizing opportunities. He also reflects on his sporting journey, career progression, and the insights gained from the various cultures he's experienced, hopefully inspiring our own listeners to embrace challenges and pursue personal growth. His story is powerful, moving, and extremely humbling. So we're going to get straight into it and our latest conversation of the Road Monkey podcast, where we are speaking to Mark Watson. Mark, hello and welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today?
Hi, Kevin. Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Well, very excited to welcome you. I know we've been connected by a mutual friend, and it's fascinating when you start going out into this network that I guess the podcast and the other people I've met along the way have opened doors for conversations. So obviously, for those not familiar with your background and perhaps a little bit about your journey, do you want to give us just a little bit of an introduction to set the scene for today?
Yeah, sure. I guess a couple of areas. One, biggest role I play is dad. Got two grown-up boys, Monty, 22, and Ripley, 20, both at uni. So living through that at the moment. From a work point of view, I'm the European Managing Director of a marketing and sourcing company. So that keeps me busy. And then on the fun stuff, I always say that the only thing I love more than running is talking about how much I love running. I'm definitely a middling athlete. I've got no aspirations for first places or medals, but just constantly trying to challenge myself and explore the world and explore events just to learn about myself and learn about the sport as best I can and follow people who do it for real as well.
Well, it seems to be a running thread on this podcast where I have people who aren't Olympic gold medalists in sport, but actually fell into sport and sports become a big part of their life, whether as an adult or when they were younger, which laid the foundation for the future. So do you just want to talk us through a little bit of your sporting journey and I guess the threads that have now fed into your life as to where it is today?
Yeah. I I always say that I was one of the weird ones at school that liked cross country. Knowing the listeners and your guests in your podcast, maybe I'm not one of those weird ones, but I just loved it. I love the challenge of the terrain and also the weather as much as I hate the cold. And that was probably the one sport at school that I was better than average at, was quite good. I represented the school, I represented the county. And then I just kind of fell out of running, to be honest, and started playing football, which I think is probably a rite of passage for many. And the thing I loved about football was the team element of it, and loved being part of a bigger group, loved feeling like I fitted in, loved that journey. And then I carried on that through to my early 20s, playing at a fairly decent level. Again, was never going to hit the Premier League. Moved to the US and played there. And then I had a couple of football injuries and I made a decision that I was probably getting too old and too slow and too frail for it, even in my mid to late 20s. And I then fell back into running as a way of getting to know Chicago, which is where I lived. And I took the running back on, 5K, 8K, and then gradually built up over the course of a year to run a marathon. And then young kids happened. And then as they got a little bit older, around about 2008, I started to get back into half marathons. And then from there, really, the journey just continued, just half marathons, triathlons, 70.3s, and then most recently moving into ultra marathons, but all connected with what was said at the beginning, like finding a way to build community and challenge myself and see the world.
Well, you've touched on it a couple of times there in terms of seeing the world. Do you just want to give us a bit of a context as to your geographic journey? Because for whether through sport, through work, or just hobby of running, like you've seen a hell of a lot of the world, and not just fleeting visits.
Yeah.
These are quite prolonged periods of your life, right?
Yeah, that's right. So born in the UK, had the opportunity to actually to move overseas in 2000, and quite a quite fortunate position where I had a job opportunity in South Africa and I had a job opportunity in the US, and was really faced with a very fortunate choice of which way did I want to go, and kind of linking back even back to the sport back then. My first question was, where can I make the biggest difference in the role I had? Where can I have the biggest impact? Where am I needed most? And then and then looking to push outside my comfort zone. And I had a quite an interesting conversation with our global president, who was based in the US, who was from England, who said even back in 2000, don't think that coming to the US is the easy option. Don't think the culture's the same. Don't think it's just going to be like moving. It's going to potentially be as much of a culture shock as going anywhere else in the world. So I took that as part of the challenge, and moved over there, and was there from 2000 through to 2007 or 2006. Came back to the UK for a very short period of time, I think 6 months, and then moved back to Chicago again in 2007, all the way through 2012. And have always loved adventure. I've always loved exploring. I hike a lot around Europe, but the fortune I have is being in a global role, being in a global job, or being in a US job. I was able to, when I was visiting clients or visiting the country, I was able to see so much of the US. And a lesson I learned early on was seize every opportunity. So if I was in a city for business, I would see if I could tag on extra time, more often than not see what races were on at the weekend and kind of jump into a trail or something. And then also globally, we moving around the world with business, always seeing if there was an opportunity to do some exploring when I was there. And I like to think I started to excel at speed tourism. I got 3 days. How much can I do in that time? So, and that's given me a really fortunate and privileged view of the world, of some of the challenges out there, but also some of the positives.
So let's talk a little bit about TMS in terms of the role itself, just so that we can get the full picture in terms of, I guess, where your role is now. But you've been there a long time, and obviously it's evolved and changed, and you've been in different places. So just take us on a little bit of an overview of that journey.
Yeah. So when I joined the business, which is over 30 years ago now, it was a true marketing consultancy. We did what was called promotion back then and worked with some incredible brands. Similar, I'm going to be a repeated theme, really looking for where I can have the biggest impact and where we could do things that had never been done before. And I think that my progression in the company came from embracing challenge, and rather than looking at things and deciding we couldn't do them, looking at them and working out how we're going to get it done. And I was inspired by my bosses back then and the founders to do that. I remember one particular meeting actually in the US where I was handed a list of problems on a project, and I just very politely wrote across the top, let's talk next week and see how we can fix all this. And inspired, and I don't know if this is a true story, so I probably need to be careful putting it out on air, but inspired by the team that set up the Sydney Harbour Bridge climb. So for those that don't know, in obviously Sydney Harbour Bridge, you can walk out over the market and up to the top and do a hike over the bridge in effect. And I'm sure I remember hearing or reading that when the company asked to do that, Sydney Council responded with a note with the 19 reasons it would never happen. So a year later, that company went back with the 19 ways to fix each of those problems. Again, I'm hoping that's factual. I seem to remember it, and very much inspired by that. Like, give me a problem, we'll find a way around it. And my career really went on through that, and that moved from solving tactical and problems on programs we were running into being put into leadership positions with teams, offices, or zones that were having their own problems, to then go in and help find ways to solve that. And I've always found the way to solve it is with people and getting the best out of people, which where those things come together. So now that's evolved. I now oversee our European enterprise. We do marketing programs. We also do sourcing programs. So getting packaging into restaurants or coffee shops, promotional toys. We produce a lot of those. But overall, we're all about creating amazing experiences for customers in any way we can.
Amazing. So I feel like we've got a bit of a picture now that the what makes up Mark and the journey so far. So just before I want to jump back to where it all started, but there's something that jumps out to me already. Is the alignment to a gentleman called Gene Kranz. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of Gene Kranz at all. Gene Kranz was the flight director for the Apollo 11 landing on the moon and the Apollo 13 mission to get everyone home safely. And he did a book called Failure is Not an Option. And it's this can-do attitude. And when they landed on the moon, I believe, and again, I'm sure someone will correct me if I've gone off tangent here, but I'm pretty sure the average age when they landed on the moon was 27 in that flight control room. And it spoke to that can-do attitude and all those sorts of things. And that isn't something generally that people are born with. It's something that they either are, like you said, inspired by the leaders and the people around them. But I want to go, as I say, right back to the beginning from an academic journey point of view, because often the writing, good or bad, is set in motion quite early on in people's journeys, especially on their academic experiences. So can you just talk me a little bit through what certainly from, I don't know, 10 through to kind of 17, 18 look like, and perhaps things that either set you or steered you away from the path that you are in now?
Yeah. Oh my. So I think my overriding memory at the very beginning of school was, and I say overriding memory, I can't remember if it was science or maths, but we did this exercise in the group where we all put in statistics, probably height, weight, all these different things. And then as part of a scatter graph or a data collection, they came back and defined two people in the class that were average. And I've mentioned this in a post before. A friend of mine, Matt Porter, and I were told we were average. We had the average coloured hair and the average coloured eyes, and we were the average height and the average weight. And at the time, I probably didn't consciously think about it. But looking back, I think that was a catalyst for me to just want to be different. And not whether I was proving to myself, which I think is more the case recently than other people, that I'm not just average. It really defined a path. And I think in my early school journey at senior school, cross country was a way to do that. I was able to stand out from the crowd from doing that. But I think at school, the other way I stood out of the crowd was by messing around quite a lot. And then I got to the year before my GCSEs, and I don't know what happened, but I just realized that I'd become less than average if I didn't buckle down. And again, I got in with a good group, I guess is the right way to say it, that I knew were focused on their studies, so I could, learn from them and be part of that kind of thinking culture. And then people even commented as we went to GCSEs, like, what happened to you? You suddenly got serious. And I think that was driving that. And I got through that, did my my GCSEs and then my A levels, doing the best I could in all of it, failing gloriously in some of it too. But the knowing that there's always another way back. So that whole period of wanting to be different, but also knowing, as we talked about inclusion and privilege, I'm very much, white, male, cisgendered, heterosexual. So I'm not that different, but there's ways that I can present myself and the way my personality and drive can come through that can make that difference. And I think that set something in motion, which I didn't know at the time, and probably didn't when you're in these longer races and you start questioning life choices and life decisions. You go, that's what caused this. That's why I'm running up this hill after however many hours. So I think that was it was a real gift for me, when I remembered that event, I was like, that one lesson, whatever the intent of that lesson was, has shaped me. That and probably a couple of other events have shaped me for the rest of my life.
I want to dive a little bit deeper into that topic of kind of self-worth and proving to yourself and these sorts of things, because the lens that I think we look through when we're 18 is probably heavily driven by that need to prove ourselves, be it to our parents, to our peers, or to the teacher that said we'll never amount to nothing. But actually, as we grow and we mature and we become more comfortable in ourselves, perhaps the lens changes a little bit. So can you just talk us through that journey from perhaps leaving school, what perhaps that motivation was, to where it is now, and your relationship with that? Because I think it's something that I think a lot of people struggle with at various points on their journey of, is that good enough? Am I good enough? And again, where do the tools come from that allow you to overcome that?
Yeah. So there's probably a couple of areas to answer that, and I think you touched on something quite deep there around self-worth. And as I think I present as an extrovert, but I'm one of those extroverts that is very uncomfortable being out there. So I identify somewhat different, and I am in the work I've done on myself over the last 5 years or so. I've realized that have relied so much on other people to define my worth, and needing reassurance or confirmation that I'm adding value, that I'm seen as being the best I can be. And I think that there's a big learning around work like that, relationships like that, and I don't want to say, like, if you don't love yourself, how can you love anyone else? It's not as trite as that, but actually the work I've done on that side over the last few years has been to make sure that I am less reliant on validation from the outside and more committed to, what are my values? What is it that I want to do? And how can the best version of myself do that? And that doesn't mean being selfish or cutting people out. It just means that they're the anchors that I've tried to anchor to, rather than what do they want me to do? How can I make them happy? What is right for them? And it's been a tough journey. I have worked with, continue to work with a breathworks coach, a guy called Josh Connolly, if I give him a shout out in here, who really helped me not only identify that in myself, but also go back to some of the childhood stuff that drives that, and then most importantly work out, what do you do with that and how do you move forward on it. So that was a lot of, and it's ongoing, obviously that's an ongoing piece for the self-worth. And where that goes into sport, and when I started to realize I was doing it for myself, the work for myself, was I'm not going to say I don't love to win. Obviously, I love to win, but I'm also very aware of my ability. It's very rare I show up at any event with aspirations of a podium, a medal, or whatever. You know, unlike my sons, who are at a level where that is what they're expecting. And I get my self-worth in sport by doing the absolute best I can, by showing up and doing the best I can. And yes, ideally running a PB or hitting a PB or hitting a longest distance, but the knowledge of I gave it my all and I was true to myself is worth way more than the first place or the PB. And there are, again, I don't get that many, but there have been PBs that I crossed the line and I'm disappointed with, because I'm like, I just didn't do what I meant to do today. And there's other races where you execute the plan perfectly. You did it, you gave it your all, sometimes within the context that you can and you can't operate in, maybe coming back for an injury or the conditions. And that's what always feels, the first person I'm competing against is myself. And then therefore, you can get in your own mind pretty quickly, but how do you then always push to what's next? How do you always look at what is the next challenge? What is it I want to go after? And I think trying to balance those things out of how can I bring that motivation and valuation by myself from exercise and sport into the rest of my life, I think is really important.
Well, we'll touch on some of those transferable lessons. I think it's lovely to hear Josh's name pop up. Me and Josh had a fascinating conversation in a sauna in Wales last summer, or the summer before, I should say. But he talks a lot, obviously, about that relationship piece from a parent's point of view, and I guess that role model and ecosystem that you grow up in has such an impact on you. I know you've touched upon that lesson, that science or maths lesson, but if you again talk through some of those, let's just say formative years, whether it's your childhood or kind of those early working years, who were those people who set the tone? Who were the role models that either were the people that you looked at and went, absolutely not, or you were like, absolutely, that's what I want to be like? And what, again, reflecting back, do you think that had a really big impact? That person, that comment, that experience, who were those people for you?
So on the work front, and again, I for many years, maybe it was I part of that validation um, was an identity was I love the work I do. I love the company, and I worked a lot, and I probably identified myself through my work. So that a lot of that foundational stuff will come through work. I think the one of the founders of the marketing store, a guy called Ali Mitchell, um, he was an inspiration because whenever we would look at ideas or concepts that we would like to deliver, he would always be the one that would say, but what if we did something bigger? And I always remember there was one client, we don't need to talk about it specifically, but there was an event and we were looking at putting on one of the ideas, like I think, was to put on some huge beach party or something, and it was beyond anything we'd ever done before. And Ali came in and was like, "Why are we doing it on the beach? Why aren't we doing it in a jumbo jet? Why don't we create the first global party where we'll put everyone in a plane and we'll party all the way around the world on this jumbo jet?" And everyone looks at him as if they were, "How are we going to do that?" And a lot of his view was, "Oh, that's down to you to sort out." So I think him as a not beyond the yes and what is truly possible. And I think Gilles Villeneuve, the Formula One driver, he used to spin a lot in his car, even though he's one of the greatest. And a journalist once asked him, "How come you keep spinning in practice?" And he's like, "Well, unless I go over the limit, I don't know where the limit is." And I think Ali was very much like that. So let's shoot for as big as we can, and we'll get as close as we can, because if we don't have those aspirations, we'll never find those solutions. So I think maybe I don't have the creative ambition that he had, but what that instilled in me is let's find a way to get this done in a way that no one else ever has. So I found him as a real inspiration. I had another boss later on called Fred Wilson, who's no longer with us, unfortunately. But he taught me the value of team. And again, I remember I'd made an error, and I went to the client and with Fred, and we sat down, and I said, "I want to let you know I've made this mistake, and I've done this, and this is what I'm going to do." This, and laid out the plan to fix it. And we got back, and Fred said, "You handled that really badly." He said, "Yeah, when you're in this office and you take accountability, it is I. When you're in front of the client and you take accountability, it is we. We are a team in front of the client. So you didn't need to take that on yourself. We have got your back." And that was a real big, like, wow, that's the power of a team. That's the power of guidance. And that's the confidence of, I can't be reckless, but I know that, I know that if something goes wrong, I'm not going to be thrown out by myself there. And I think that team sport, keep bringing it back to that, but that's an element of the team sport piece, is that, okay, we're in this, and our whole result is going to be driven together. So I found that being hugely inspiring. And then on the sports journey, again, it was people that would do things that, even if I didn't like the sport, that just stop people in their tracks. Jonathan Edwards running the triple jump record, which I think just hit 30 years. It's either the longest or one of the longest uh, world records. Just knowing, just witnessing that and seeing that, it just makes me excited to be able to do my own version of that.
Fascinating. Do you know, I find it really interesting that definitely I'd put myself in that average athlete category, but have been witness to, I think, over my time, probably 3 or 4 world records in various guises in person in the sporting field. And there is something quite special about that of, well, if they can do that, what can I do? And it already sounds like there's a lot of aspects of sport, obviously the running side of things, that carry over into your life. But if you had to, again, with your mature reflective hat on, looking back, what are some of the core things that even up to this day now that sport has taught you that you utilize in every aspect of your life?
Um, I think so. There's a few. I think there's a crossover piece. I think the idea of seizing every opportunity. I think that's come from some personal experience anyway. But then in sport, knowing that it might be a destination, it might be a venue, it might be an opportunity, say, to watch other people, if you can. And I know often some of us in a more privileged positions do that than others. Just grab it. I think it's you're going to learn from it, succeed or fail. You're going to learn from it, and witnessing things and witnessing other people doing great things, as you say, is a real piece. I think the other bit is I put down to my coach, Jen Hayes. There was a big race I did that was is the biggest challenge I've ever taken on, and she sent me a note the night before the race, and it just had, I think it was 6 words, and it just said, "Make small right decisions all day long." And I took it and I applied that very specifically in the race, but I've taken that into my personal life as well. It's like you can't take everything on all the time, but and you'll have leadership decisions that require that moment to stop and pause and get insight and bring all those things, which we do as business leaders. But that notion of just make small right decisions all day long is something I try and do as best I can when faced with those. And then the other inspiration I've taken from someone else in sport is an American football coach called Lou Holtz. And he has a book called Wins, Losses, and Lessons. And one of his concepts is this idea of, does anyone care if I don't show up? And in his context, it's about training. And there's so many people in an American football team. If you don't show up to training, does anyone notice? And I've taken that to heart, like the power of commitment, the power of showing up every day. And if you're not there, does anyone care? And I take that in the work environment. Like if I'm not in the office, does it make a difference or not? But also in family and friendships. Like, what are you bringing? What's your positive contribution to that group? And I really like that notion of, does anyone care if you're not there? Because again, I think it paves that way.
There's so many, my brain's firing off in all these different things. One thing I am curious of, again, you're so worldly in terms of travels professionally and personally. When you look back, are there any things that being in different parts of the world have taught you? Because often you'll go to a certain country, or even within the same company, that's not how we do things here, kind of starts to pop up.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, it can open up our mind to different ways of working, whether that's through the people we meet, the companies we end up working for, or just experiences we have along the way. So when you reflect back along your atlas of traveling around the world and the different places you've been, are there any particular experiences or places that have really shifted your thinking on things?
I think overall, the power of community comes through in everywhere. I also believe, and obviously the world is a tumultuous place right now. I do believe that this notion of generous assumption, and that most people you meet are trying to do what they believe is the right thing. And if you can meet them there, sometimes you won't agree it's the right thing. I get that, but I think most people their starting point is positive intent, and I think that builds out the community piece. And I think by far, if you're part of that community, people want you to do well. And again, I found that specifically in Chicago, where finding running groups or finding cohorts there, that sense of belonging you can get, and often through the through common interests. Again, maybe it's running, maybe it's other things. But I think the power of community works wherever you go. And if you go into that not thinking about, well, what am I going to get from that group? More about, well, what can I add to it and what can I learn from it? I had a great quote the other day. Move from being a know-it-all to a learn-it-all. And so going in and being open to those, to see how that community benefits you as well as you benefit the community, I think that's really great. And then I also think that the everyday people demonstrate what countries are like. I remember I was in Japan, and was obviously the language issue but I was by myself, and I was absolutely flummoxed by just trying to use the metro there. And the number of people and it was in Tokyo, and it was very stereotypical, like you see on the movies, everyone running around at 1,000 miles an hour. The number of people that stopped to make sure that I could get where I wanted to get to, I was absolutely dumbfounded by. It was just, and again, it was rush hour. They didn't have to do it, and it happens in London too. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I just feel that generosity and warmth is everywhere, and it's up to us as visitors, I think, to find it and embrace it. And know that people demonstrate their values and their worth in different ways, in different cultures. And I have traveled with people that are like, well, we wouldn't do it like that. And it's like, well, no, but maybe they're doing it better. Maybe the intent's the same. And isn't it great that there's another way that kindness or that drive or that empathy or that sadness is expressed, because it just helps us learn.
Well, you led us off by talking about like the family side of things as being a parent, and obviously being a parent changes the lens for everybody when you're on the career pathway, whatever you want to call it, going through the different tiers of a business and different places and different roles, etc. Perhaps we have not necessarily a singular view, but we have quite a tunnel vision view on where we're heading, and obviously being a parent starts to change that. So and we've had a lot of people on this show, right, who've got kids, and they say, once you've had kids, it changes the way you live your life and all those sorts of things. So when you again reflect back on that kind of moment of becoming a parent and where you are now, what are the kind of things that perhaps have shifted in how you approach either your work or your exercise regime or whatever it is that actually says becoming a parent has really shaped that in me?
Yeah, I my journey on that one is not straightforward, maybe. So my first son, Mackenzie, he died the day he was born, and we were in a situation where, only the day before, but we knew what. To put it in context, he was what's called a super preemie, so he was born way earlier than was viable for him to survive, and we knew it was going to happen the day before, and really it was a case of going through that process. And so my first experience of fatherhood was combined with my first experience of close loss. And to me, and again, this is very when I say personal, I mean, I don't expect everyone to agree with it. To me, it meant so much to me that Mackenzie was born alive, and my wife and I had time with him, albeit a few short hours, and the profound impact those hours had on me and his birth had on me were probably greater than the impact his passing had on me. So I have to frame it up in that. And I think what he helped me, and I talked about how much I worked, right? And it was at that moment I realized how precious life was. And that's, again, that sounds somewhat cliche and trite, but you realize it's not just having a tiny baby that weighs a pound in your arms to realize how fragile life is. You get to see it, and I'm sure many people see it in their own way as well. It shows you how fragile life is. It also shows you how fleeting it is, and the impact people can have on you. And really, what I then took forward from that was really trying to reassess a lot of how much I worked and where my focus was and where my priority was. I also, at the time, a close friend of mine called David Blood gave me a book called Many Lives, Many Masters, which is probably a controversial book in itself, but there's some very interesting tenets in there that I took out. But I've only read it once and it landed with me, so I've kept the message, and I don't want to reread the book in case the message is different. But the message really in it was that, the life on this little blue dot, you're here to teach someone a lesson, and until that lesson's done, you don't get to part. And actually, some people teach that lesson really fast and they would die young, and some it takes a longer time. And again, I know that's, people will have different beliefs on that, and I respect that. And whether I believe that religiously or theologically is different. It's that notion in itself. And I do believe that in that very short space of time, 3 hours, Mackenzie taught me how to be a dad. And it was another couple of years till Monty was born. But just that reappraisal of, works hard, works busy, there's lots going on. And I know I've never got the balance right. I know it's always balance on the work side still. But also looking at Monty as a baby and going, wow, this is such a gift because I didn't get this with Mackenzie. And am I prepared to risk that this could be the last time this happens? So really making sure that the two boys that are with me now, Monty and Ripley, are the most centered for me, and that they're the ones that make. I'm not sure I'd have prioritized them as much as I do had I not had that experience. And I think that moving into the bigger, wider world, understanding the power of purpose, understanding if you're doing something for someone else or for something else, you can achieve so much more. Knowing if that young boy could have that profound an impact on me in 3 hours, what positive impact can I have on people over a week, over a month, over a lifetime? What can I give back to them? How can they, if there's any good within me, how can I share that? What can they get out of that? And then also going back to seizing opportunities, as we said, time is short, no matter how long we're here for in the scale of things. And there was one other thing through that a little bit after that moved me, which is very relevant to Mackenzie, but I also framed up. As you can imagine, there's a lot of struggle dealing with those things. And I saw a video by Professor Brian Cox, and it was about space, and it was unrelated to what I was going through. But what he talked about was time and place. And what he said was, and again, I'm probably bastardizing what he said, but what he said was, if you're in a place and you walk away from that, the place, so it's still there and it's still carrying on its own thing. Just because you're not there, it doesn't stop. And he said the same thing about time. When you're at a time event, you move on, but that time event still exists. Without getting into physics, I was like, wow, that means that I've never lost that connection with Mackenzie. I've never lost that moment of when he was born. I'm just not at that physical place anymore. And I also try and make sure that I don't therefore grieve events or grieve places or When I visit places and I have to leave, or I'll go through events and they're over, go, well, actually, it still exists. I'm just not there anymore. And that lesson that, again, inadvertently taught me about how just because you move on, you don't have to leave things behind. And that's been very important to me emotionally to get through some things, but also I think how I view the world and how I view, again, my world in sport.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for sharing that and being so vulnerable and open there, because it's unimaginable. The thread of, I guess, fountains and drains, coined from a former guest, St. Jake and Damien Hughes, they speak about that a lot in terms of making choices of who we surround ourselves with, whether that's personally or professionally, and making sure that we have that. But there's also that second piece around those profound lessons and moments in time, and the length of a life versus the length of a lesson is something that's jumping out in the way my brain works. So, my dad was 59 when he passed, and in the space of a few months, like in his latter months, I learned a lesson of time that I had no appreciation of time until that point where you knew the end was coming. And I think that's something that I remember, especially going through kind of the therapy after it. You have lots of different viewpoints and people feeding in, and somebody said to me, the experience you have had is a gift, because it is something you will carry with you for the rest of your life. Now, until you've gone through that, that's really hard to explain to somebody that has
Yeah.
profoundly shaped your life, right? So, no, thank you very much for sharing that.
No, appreciate
I've noted down the two books, and I'll make sure they are in the notes underneath. For sharing. But I guess that kind of brings us up to today in terms of all the threads and how the different parts of influence now. What about moving forwards? And I say that because every day we take stock of where we are and where we're heading. And once you've had those kind of compass recollaborations of going, maybe I'll head in that direction or that direction, what does 26 and beyond look like for you? And what's driving you now, whether it's sporting goals, work goals, what comes next?
work goals continue to be the same, and that is how do we inspire and empower our people to thrive in a way that they can do phenomenal work for our clients. I'm very focused on the tools we can put in place, the environment we can create where people feel the safety to be able to express themselves and therefore deliver their best work. So I do believe that financial goals and awards and all of those things are outcomes, not destinations. And I'm very focused within the organization on giving opportunity to people that may not have it. The notion that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity isn't. So how do we start to create more of the opportunity for the most talented people around? And then once we bring people into the organization, how do we get it to the point where, one, they are they're committed to our community and committed to our direction and our values, or if they leave, that they leave better for being here. And that's something that, again, we've focused on previously. Our going in proposition on hiring is leave changed. Our commitment is that if you come and spend time with us, you will leave here a profoundly different person because of the experiences we give you. So that's where my commitment is. And obviously through that, it is focused on getting the clients working and getting the client work done and making them and the business successful. On the sporting side, I am talking of lessons being learned. I'm becoming profoundly aware of the toll that this hobby has on me, and I'm first, second, and third to acknowledge that I don't do enough strength and conditioning. I don't do enough flexibility, and really, the end of last year, I think it all came quite hard at me, and I've been doing it a long time, so a much more commitment on knowing that I need to look after my body if I want to continue doing this. And I hear many people that used to run but don't anymore because of their knees and things like that. So I need to make sure that the shell that I'm in is keeping it as best as I can. And then for me, it's going back to challenging myself and what is it I want to do next? Do I want to improve? Do I want to get faster? Do I want to go longer? So specifically this year, I continue to run for Highgate Harriers, which is the running club. Again, very much down the pecking order. I normally miss the team photo at the end because they've all packed up and put their kit away, and I'm trundling around. So I'm still committed to working with them. I've got the Berlin Marathon at the end of the year. I've run Berlin 3 times, and every time there's been a big curveball that's come in and has meant it's been a horrendous day. Again, go back early, sometimes you just have to acknowledge that, and you did the best you can. And this last Berlin, this last year, was one of those where I was immensely proud of what I did, despite, if you look on the results sheet, you'd wonder why. But I've got a big focus on doing my best ever event there, and hopefully kind of top 3 marathon time. And then I've also committed to push myself in a whole different area. I love hiking. I love the outdoors. I love challenging myself out there. So I have recently signed up to Summit Mont Blanc at the end of July, hopefully. So I've done a lot of hiking in the area. I did a lot of hiking in the Dolomites, and I've been at a somewhat of an altitude, but decided that that will also, I'll need strength and conditioning for that. I'll need to be healthy for that. Obviously, great training for the marathon too. So and then along the way, I'll probably do. I like to invent my own races. So I not particularly original one, but I think a couple of years ago I decided I want to run every bridge in London. So I started at Kew and ended at Tower Bridge. I also used to live up by Alexandra Palace. So I decided I needed to run from the Alexandra Palace TV tower to the Crystal Palace TV tower, hitting every London park along the way. So that was fun. And then in May, I've decided I'd like to run across the Isle of Wight. And I'm sure there's a formal race for doing that, but I'm just going to go down and kind of use that as some fun and inspiration, just get out. But all of it leading, I guess, to hopefully the top of Mont Blanc, which is a very different type of challenge for me. But, we'll give it a go, see what happens.
I don't know how you managed to pack so much into just 1 year. I'm exhausted just listening to it. I love what you said there around talent is equally distributed, opportunity isn't. And I think for leaders out there, you do have a responsibility to make sure that you A, recognise that, and B, promote and give people those opportunities who perhaps haven't got it. So fantastic. I guess the notion of the podcast, the notion of a road monkey is that life goes along on a line, and at some point it goes off in a different direction. It sounds like that's happened to you quite a few times in very different directions. So what would be your closing message to those out there, whether it's personally, people in their work lives, their sporting lives, or whatever it is, that are trying to find that new direction as we kick off the year, and kind of, reflecting on all that wisdom and experience you picked up along the way?
Well, I'm hoping you use the word wisdom lightly there. So I think ramblings is better, but thank you for that. I think that there's a couple. One is, again, a notion I try and use from the sporting context is never make a decision going uphill. And I think that when things are at their ultimate pressure point, trying to make a decision, and often at that point is to stop. Just get to a point where you can pull your thoughts together, get some clarity of mind, and then make the decision. I in the work context as well, and personally, that's what I encourage people to do. Like when everything's coming down on you, that's not the time to make the decision. That's the time to create the space to make the decision, and they'll be really interested in which direction that takes you. And then I think there's an element of bravery and an element of stepping out. And fortunately for me, most of those times I've stepped out, it's worked out okay. But you can do the best you can to control the conditions you're in. And if you do that and plan as best you can, then say yes. Just take that opportunity, say yes. There are very few times I find in life that you can't reverse a decision. You want to move to another country, you don't like it, then you can come back. If you want to run a race and it's just not for you, you can stop. But I think having the bravery to, when you're lucky enough for those opportunities to come, just step into them and do the best you can, show it the best you can, and I think you'll be amazed at where you get led. And that's definitely something that I benefited from.
My mind's jumping back to 2022 when I crossed the Brighton Marathon finish line, and my wife said to me, "What do you think?" And I said, "Never again." And I'm not that many weeks away from attempting the London Marathon, so I think I'm definitely in that school of thought. But look, Mark, it's been absolutely awesome. I'm super grateful for a little shout out for Mindy, who we will twist her arm and get her on here eventually, for introducing us. But yeah, it's been, there's so many different aspects to your journey, and obviously we'll make sure we include your LinkedIn and every other connection in the notes below for everyone who wants to follow up. But yeah, a huge thank you for sharing some time with us. It's been absolutely awesome.
Thank you for the invite, and love the podcast, love what you're doing, love the guests, and was really grateful to be on it. So thanks very much.
A huge thank you for joining us today for our latest podcast. You can connect with Mark on socials, as well as both Josh Connolly and Jen Hayes, who were mentioned in our discussion, all via the links below this episode. A quick request to my wonderful podcast community that if you are able to sponsor me in raising charity funds by taking on the London Marathon in April, you can find my fundraising page in the show notes. As always, please be sure to hit subscribe however you're joining us today, and we look forward to you joining us again very soon for another episode of the Road Monkey Podcast.